Leadership and Advocacy.
And we're back with another episode of SLP's Wine and Cheese. I'm Deb.
And I'm Maria.
And here's our podcast.
For the Realistic SLP.
Welcome.
Here we are. So we are back, and we are so excited because we have a very lovely wine and cheese. So this is a Cabernet Sauvignon. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm going to pretend like I am. So a Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's very different, and I like this taste. It's by Naked Winery, and it's called Penetration. That's like the side name for it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting choice,
yes.
Maria.
Yes, I know. Well, they are a great company because not only is their wine delicious, I'm going to talk about their wine first.
But it's also a dysphagia vocab word.
Exactly. Yes. But, you know, if you do have penetration, you don't want to be drinking thin liquids. So, you know, watch out there. That's all I got to say.
Right.
So, but however, we do not have dysphagia. I say it the Greek way. The Greek way. Yes. And it has black cherries that taste, and it definitely has that smoky and barrel toasty finish, which I got to be honest, I've never had a wine with that smoky barrel taste. Mm-hmm. And I tasted it instantly without reading the description because I like to taste it first and then go back.
Right. You don't want to be influenced.
I don't want to be influenced in more ways than one.
Right.
So I definitely liked it, but it did take me a couple of sips to get used to the different taste. So yeah, Cabernet Sauvignon, I would vote drink it. Definitely drink it. What do you vote?
I vote drink it. I really like it.
Yes.
Yeah,
well,
it's very different. It's an interesting wine.
Great. Yeah, you drink that while I talk about this company. So Naked Winery, they are proud to offer our listeners a discount with the promo code WINENOT, 2 separate words, and they're going to offer 15% off 3 bottles plus $10 flat rate shipping. So they're offering this only until May 31st. So in
the day of our show.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes. That's the day of our show, which, I mean, we might as well talk about it since we're on topic.
Okay.
So it's at the Creek and the Cave in Long Island City. Doors open at 7:30. There's going to be a link and all that fun stuff.
There already is.
There already is.
Yeah, there's a link in our Instagram bio, and there's a link on my Instagram bio.
Okay, and I will put a link in my Instagram bio.
Wonderful. So general admission tickets are $10, and then we're offering $5 tickets to students. So just have your student ID at will call.
Yeah, great. Means like bring it with you.
Yeah, just have it with you so that when they're like, oh, you have a student ticket, like, can I see your student ID? So the doorman has that. And then we're going to have music and 4 comedians in a comedy show hosted by myself and Maria.
Okay, yes. This is my first time hosting a live comedy show, and I'm very excited, not nervous, not one bit.
Good.
Not one bit.
Don't be.
And
are you going to write any jokes?
I could. I don't know if they'll be funny.
Oh, well, that's the point of a joke.
So it's terrible so people can laugh at me so I can cry in the bathroom?
No, you're supposed to make it funny.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. I will work on that.
Yeah, we'll figure out. We'll get our act together.
Yes, we will.
Pun intended.
Pun intended.
Yes, that's a pun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it. You're penetrating.
Yes.
In my brain.
Good.
Thank you.
Hopefully just your brain.
Right. And exactly. Not in the pure form
your throat.
sinuses.
Yeah.
In my larynx.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My oropharynx, if you will.
Yes.
I feel like
you're welcome for me not doing that to you.
Yeah. So you voted drink it and not sink it, despite the different taste.
Right.
But
I like it.
Speaking of being different, so this episode, we're going to have a bit of a change from our typical layouts, where we're going to have an interview towards the end of the show with Craig Coleman, And you'll get to hear more from him in our interview.
He's running for Vice President of Planning for ASHA. So we sat down and chatted with him for a bit. So that'll be our last segment in this episode. So stay tuned to hear some info from Craig.
Yes. And so ASHA has a statement that SLPs, on top of all of our roles and responsibilities, should also be advocates. And it may sound like, oh my God, so much work, but I feel like we all do it like without even thinking about it and stuff. And I know I do. And when I sat and thought about it, I'm like, yeah, I definitely feel like I am an advocate for the individuals I work with. But ASHA does have a statement that Deb would love to read.
Oh, well, this is just a bunch of notes that are all over the place. So this is not ASHA's statement, but this is like information I took from ASHA's website. But basically, so currently in our climate, and then also with in the school settings having Common Core standards, we need to make sure we're advocating for the services that speech pathologists provide, so that our services are not used or provided by somebody else, basically. So it's important this time of month, year, but in general, always, to advocate for the services that you provide and the clients who could require your assistance in the school setting. So whether that means like becoming involved with response to intervention within school, or making sure that everyone gets the mandates that they would benefit from on your caseload. That's something that we want to focus on in order to provide the best type and amount of services.
Yeah. And even like if you think a kid would benefit from a group mandate, and then, approaching the parents and the teacher about it, and just maybe differentiating the different types of therapy sessions, like an individual versus a group, a pull-out session versus
all the different service delivery models.
Service delivery models.
So it's not just pull out and push in. It could be co-teaching. It could be speech club. It could be...
Speech club?
Speech club is
that like a club for speechers?
Well,
is that what was happening on May 31st?
No,
I just
it
made
could
up
be
that
speech club. Like, you don't talk about it, though.
Oh, no.
Like Fight Club?
I've never seen that movie. Shocking.
Oh, my goodness, Maria.
I know.
Okay, so anyway, speech club is when you are on the verge of discharging somebody from services, and then you, like, observe them in their spontaneous speech during, like, any activities, and to see if they're carrying over and generalizing their skills.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you coin this term?
I didn't. It's a service delivery model that's in the textbook that I've been teaching out of for my speech in the educational setting class. So it's a real thing.
You kind of didn't make it up there.
Nope, didn't make it up.
Didn't make it up.
It's real.
It's real.
But yeah, it's just like making sure that they're generalizing those skills to their spontaneous speech.
And that's called speech club?
Yeah, so it's a service delivery model where at that point, like, it depends what state you live in if you're, like, able to do this. But you can keep somebody on your caseload, but you stop seeing them for therapy, and you just check in with them in their natural environment to see if they're generalizing their skills and promoting carryover.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I could look up the actual definition if you would like me to.
No.
Okay.
I'm good there. Thank you.
But yeah, so what also is important is that we want to raise awareness and education about what speech pathologists do. Yeah, because I feel like no one really knows.
No, they don't.
So that's what I've been putting effort towards on my Instagram.
You have definitely been doing that, and you are really good at it.
Thanks.
And I just kind of want to like copy and paste what you write and make it for my own, but I won't.
Sure, do it. I don't care.
I just want to like repost what you write. I'm like, this is good.
Good, then do it.
I mean, for all of us
I take it from ASHA though. I'm like, should I put citations in my...
Maybe.
I'm not doing that.
Okay.
It's all from ASHA. If anyone has a question, I took it from ASHA. I probably copied and pasted it from ASHA.
Maybe you should write that at the bottom.
Yeah. I always think about it, but then I'm like, what if ASHA doesn't want to be associated with me?
They might not.
So that's why I just don't... I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to draw ASHA attention to me. I don't know. I never know exactly like how right or how wrong I'm
No, I think they would be very proud to.
I don't know if they would. What if they're
know?
like, why is this girl sitting on the floor and speaking for all speech pathologists? Then I'd be like, I don't even know her. I don't know who that is.
Right.
And then I'll dye my hair again.
Right.
I'll be a different person.
Pink. I vote pink.
But then we also want to advocate for eligibility and during the IEP process. And then also, finally, we need to make sure that we are informed and staying informed and what's happening in the government. All of my sentences are messed up, but we need to know what's happening at a government level,
right?
So that we have to make sure that the rights of the people we treat are not being violated, and then our services are not being advocated for. So we have to make sure that we stay informed and make sure we elect people who represent us in a way that protects our jobs and our clients' therapy services that we provide.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of times, like, ASHA leader will have different articles about, like, legislation, and I don't even know if that's the right word to use.
Legislation?
I wanted to say that, but legistration?
No.
Is that not it?
That's like registration and
maybe they're registering as they're legislating. I don't know what they're doing. I'm not there.
Right.
Well, the ASHA people are. The ASHA do have their advocates. And they're advocating for, like, not stricter, but, like, more coverage for, let's say, children who get a cochlear implant or hearing aids. I feel like I'm always hearing about that. And that they still need speech therapy just because they got implanted, let's say.
Right.
So that's just an example that comes to mind. So things like that is what I was thinking of. But how do you consider yourself an advocate?
Well, I feel like I've built myself a bit of a platform, so my voice carries a little bit further in the field than other people might not have that privilege. So I definitely want to utilize my voice appropriately and be an advocate. So I would like to spread public awareness.
Cheer. No, okay.
What?
I was going to say
cheer.
Holiday cheer.
For all to hear.
For all to hear.
No, I would like to spread awareness so that the public is aware of what we do, and I feel like ASHA should put out more statements like when things happen in the news in terms of like anything with disabilities or children or anything in healthcare.
TBI. I feel like that's
anything. I just want to hear ASHA on the news. Just be like, this is the position from the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association on recent automobile accidents in the relation to TBI. Something like I just want to hear about speech on the news so that we hear from like psychologists and teachers and stuff. So I just want to hear. I also want to not only spread awareness to the public, but then also create an educational platform on my Instagram where I'm like informing. So maybe people can go there for ideas, for inspiration, but then also like go back to the fundamentals of what speech pathology is and maybe study or learn something. I don't know. Who knows?
I think that's definitely plausible. I think you have a lot of useful information on there.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I don't always watch your videos. I'm sorry, confession time, because I just don't. Because I'm just like, I know she's good at what she's doing. I'm sure the session's
today
great.
Kids were asking me about how mommies get babies in their belly.
Oh, okay. That's a good question.
It was a good video.
What did you ask? Okay.
Well, you'll have to watch it.
I'm going to have to watch that one. That one I will watch.
If this episode, if you're listening to this after May 2019, I'm wearing a floral dress in that episode.
Yes,
so,
and she's still wearing it, so it's a real video.
Yeah.
So that's a great way. So you feel like your Instagram page has allowed you to do that, which is
trying.
Good. Yeah.
And then I also like to do presentations at my school to inform the teachers as to what a speech pathologist does and how we can help. And my CF is actually doing one tomorrow at her school, so I'm going to go see her.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
How do you feel like you're an advocate?
Okay. Good question.
Thank you. Well, I thought of it all on my own.
Did you?
Yeah.
Great. Well, I have gotten a lot of my students' devices.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that was definitely a process. But also it's like sometimes you have to change a device. Even today, there's been like a device that broke and I had to like drop it off. So like there is a lot of like behind the scenes work of a device. So that's totally my responsibility, but also of course like everybody on the team too. So you're like kind of the point person when a kid gets a device. So you're also the person who like starts the process of getting the device, and you're like the ongoing point person as the kid has the device. So like teachers will come to me, and which I love that, you know, they'll be like, oh, how do I do this? Or if they're teaching a lesson and I'm there with the kid, I'll show them, or I'll just use the device with the lesson, obviously. So I'm just like constantly that device person. Like,
that's good.
So, but also like for the parents too. So I've had parent trainings with the device, and like keeping consistent contact with the parents, like, oh, how's it going with the device at home? And I recommended like one parent, because she was like, oh, he has so many like after school activities. It's like kind of hard to set like time to do stuff with the device. And I was thinking, I'm like, oh, what about the car ride? Like in the car, you could play like I Spy, like what do you see as you're driving? Or just different like songs, because the student loves songs. So you could like have them request different radio stations or different artists with the device.
Right.
So
that's a great idea.
Isn't it? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so I thought of that. So the device is just like, I feel like that's just like one word that comes with so many advocacy.
Right, you have to do a lot of advocating when it comes to devices.
Right. So, but also I think being a team player, which I love collaborating with everyone who's on the team, really. So I just feel like you get great ideas from them, and then like you see something in your, you know, with your speech glasses, with your speech. What is that called that you call it? Like your speech, like, I think you brought it up too. Like everyone's going to look at something.
Oh, like the speech lens?
Yeah, the speech lens. And then
like a neurologist thinks everything's wrong with the brain, and a cardiologist is like, it's the heart.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I like that, because I like to hear what they have to say too, and then just kind of like find similarities into like what I'm saying. So I like that as well.
Bridge that gap.
Bridge the gap.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
You make it sound so much fancier.
Well,
thank you, though.
Thank you.
It's a compliment.
I mean, that's what they have me here for.
Yeah.
Just to add a little bit of fancy.
A little fancy.
Yeah.
Is that a word?
No.
No.
Just shortened one.
Okay.
I got fancy with fancy.
Sounds good. And then also empowering the parents. So a lot of times they like come to you and like, what can I do? And what can I do? And then I'm just like always giving them ideas. And my favorite thing and place is the library. So there's so many free things at the library. And I mean, if it's free, like there's right. So they have like summer reading programs and like crochet club and like all this fun stuff.
At the library.
At the library. Isn't it so exciting?
If anything, Maria has used the podcast to advocate for the library. Exactly. And on that note, we're going to pause for a commercial break. Stay tuned, because after this break, we're going to talk more advocacy, and then later on, we'll hear from Craig. This episode of SLP's Wine and Cheese is brought to you by ThroatScope. ThroatScope is an illuminated tongue depressor and a retraction tool. ThroatScope includes reusable light handles that slide into a single-use tongue depressor. ThroatScope features a natural light output for tissue examination and diagnosis. It has 20 hours of constant illumination, and it's designed to decrease the risk of cross-contamination, and it's also environmentally friendly. ThroatScope includes a 1-year product warranty on their reusable light handles.
Yes.
Maria, do you have a ThroatScope?
Of course I do. They have a wonderful product that I use all the time, especially during my assessments. And you could find out more and purchase their items at throatscope.com.
We're back, everyone. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram and Patreon. You can purchase tickets to our live show May 31st. That's coming up really soon. And now we're going to have an interview with Craig Coleman, who's running for Vice President of Planning for ASHA.
Hey everyone, I'm Maria from SLP's Wine and Cheese, and here we have a lovely guest, Craig Coleman, joining us from West Virginia.
Hey everybody, my name is Craig Coleman. I specialize in stuttering, and I'm running for ASHA Vice President of Planning.
Great, welcome. We also have Deborah with us, of course.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. So, Craig, that's super interesting. And you're from West Virginia, and you teach at Marshall University, correct?
Correct, yep.
How did you decide you wanted to run for Vice President of Planning?
Good question. So I've done a lot with state associations. I came to Marshall University about 7 years ago, and prior to that, I ran our stuttering center at Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. And during that time, I served as president of the Pennsylvania Speech Language Hearing Association twice.
Mm-hmm.
I've also been involved in a number of different ASHA committees and boards. I got to serve as the coordinator for ASHA SIG-4, which is the SIG on fluency and fluency disorders. I was on the committee to revise the scope of practice in 2016, and I was on the legislative council with ASHA for a while, many years ago. So I like to get into legislative issues a lot. I like to be involved in strategic planning. I like to kind of help set the agenda for important issues, and most of all, I like to help people come up with solutions for important issues.
That's great.
That's fantastic.
It's important to be a problem solver, I think.
Right. I mean, I feel like so often, especially in like the age of the internet, that the majority of the forums online, you just kind of see complaining rather than a problem-solving oriented point of view. So I do appreciate when someone's like, well, let's do something about it.
Right.
Yeah, so before I got into the things that I would like to talk about and some things I pulled our listeners for, I was wondering if you could sum up a little bit of your platform and the things that you are interested in targeting.
Sure. So there's several different areas that I kind of have identified by talking to people during this campaign that I feel like are really important. One is related to school-based SLPs and caseload and workload issues, because I've heard that issue has come up over and over again, that it's really a barrier to people being able to do their jobs effectively. And to me, that's sort of the standard that we have to have is, do people have the circumstances and the work environments to be able to serve the clients the best way? And caseload and workload are part of that. Another issue that I really have come across again and again is encroachment. I think there's a lot of things going on, especially with ABA therapists, that kind of going into the scope of practice of a speech language pathologist, that's been an issue that I've heard from many people. And I think we need to do a better job of not saying we're not going to collaborate with people, because of course we want to do that, but of really strengthening the legislation in different states and working with state associations so that we can nail down in licensure laws what a SLP does and what they can do versus what other people can do. And that comes down to the scope of practice in the state, at the license level.
Right, yeah. So that there would be more strict guidelines. Well, most people don't even know that speech pathologists work with swallowing. That's always everyone's surprise whenever I talk about it. So that would be a nice thing to target.
And I think that, going along with that, I think one of the other major things I hope to accomplish is to just be able to increase public awareness of what we do. I think, as you pointed out, a lot of people still don't understand the full scope of what a speech language pathologist does. And I think that leads to a lot of other issues with reimbursement. It leads to a lot of other issues with legislation negatively affecting us a lot, because people just don't understand our scope of practice and the amount of things that we do well. And, I think that another big thing for me in looking at what positive changes we can make is, I think we need to relook at how we're training people. And I think, historically, our model has worked pretty well, but with the scope of practice expanding as much as it has, I think it's probably time to examine whether our model of training students works as well, and what we can do to maybe make it a little bit better and more efficient for people, so that they're getting a lot of training opportunities. Like, for example, I've heard from a lot of medical SLPs that feel like people are not being trained to do instrumentation and, being able to do those things. So I think those are priorities we can work on. And certainly there are the standing priorities too of reimbursement issues that, you know, I kind of always have said that we kind of keep saying that, you know, we push this evidence-based practice concept, which is really important. But on the other side of that, we're told that if we just collect the evidence, then, you know, we'll get reimbursement, we'll get legislation, and that doesn't seem to be happening. What seems to be happening is we keep collecting evidence and not getting anything in return. And so we really have to work hard, I think, to advocate for being able to collect the evidence, but then getting the reimbursement, getting the improvements in client service because of it.
And I wrote down things that matter to me, and awareness was my number 2. I feel like there's so many things that come out in the news where I would love to hear like what the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association's comments are on this situation. Yet it's not really something that I see in the media, and I would like to see some change in that area. Yeah. I have a speech therapy Instagram where I like to take videos of myself like doing speech therapy activities to provide a model for how that activity should get done. Because I feel like this field is so isolating. So it's like after you do your observations, primarily you're going to be out in a school. Most only need one SLP. Yeah. So it's not like you have someone to give you feedback or to see a model on a daily basis. So it just seems like if there was like a TV show that featured an individual demonstrating progress through speech therapy, or even a documentary or something on the news, or a comment on a current event, then that would make me feel like, oh, there's a little bit more legitimacy here to our profession.
You know, one of the things that I've talked about in my campaign so far is that, you know, ASHA tends to do a really good job telling the stories of famous people with communication disorders. But the issue is...
Maria, what is that?
I don't have no idea.
I think that's me. I don't know what that is, though.
Why is it my fault?
I don't know what it is.
Hold on a second. That's one of my kids that I normally see at this time that I rescheduled on teletherapy. Let me just tell him.
Oh, sorry. See?
I'm like, Maria.
It's always my fault. Anyway.
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry. You're busy.
It's not your fault. It was Maria's fault.
But ASHA does a really good job of telling the stories of people who, you know, are very famous and things like that. And so, you know, but that's interesting because, you know, the problem with that is, though, they're not very good at telling the stories of people who are your average person, right? And those are the people who you need to get to, you know, because like, you know, people see Gabby Giffords and, you know, people see, you know, people like that, and they say, or James Earl Jones who stutters, and they say, you know, that's all well and good, but those people have a lot of resources and a lot of money that the average person doesn't have to get those same services. And, you know, what I would really like to see the story of, and I think this gets to your point, is the story of like Joe Smith or Mary Smith, you know, and see them from the very beginning of treatment to the end of treatment and see what progress they make and what they do. That's an ad campaign that I would really like to see ASHA get involved with and do something like that, because I think it can, you know, get out there. I mean, you know, many years ago, nursing had a shortage of nurses, and they teamed up with Johnson & Johnson. And they ran these campaigns, you know, to kind of just increase public awareness of what nurses do and the impact that they make. And it made a huge difference in the way people view nurses.
Right. I just started watching Nurse Jackie, and now I have a different view of nurses too. So
yeah, we need something like that. I mean, you know, one of my grad students last year, we went, you know, around to a couple different clinics on the eastern part of the country, and we went to some different stuttering clinics, and we actually did a documentary on stuttering. It's called Stuttering Part of Me. You can YouTube it. It's up there free. But, you know, we did a documentary, and we just kind of followed, like, you know, young adults and just kind of told their story about, like, what treatment was like, what it's like to be a person who stutters. Because I think those things are really empowering for the clients to see as well. That, Absolutely. You know, this is my example of what I can be working toward or get to. And they allow people to see the importance of what we do.
Right. And it's not like you're forcing that person to compare themselves to James Earl Jones.
Right. Right.
Because he's got other things going on too.
Right, yeah. He's got talents in some other areas.
I know.
I've tried stuttering documentaries I found on YouTube, and a lot of my younger clients, like adolescents, they love to watch it. But I feel like when people hear you're a speech pathologist, they're like, oh, so you work with people with lisps or who stutter.
That's right.
Not just that. So I think stuttering is something that we are more known to do or to work with. But yeah, like swallowing, people don't know, or even like cognitive impairments, like, oh, really? Like memory and stuff? And it's like, absolutely. Anything from the brain to like the lungs.
Even
like,
in school, something as basic as literacy, people don't know that we have anything to do with that.
Exactly. Yeah, Craig, I feel like you're psychic because every time I'm thinking something, then you say it. Because it really, I work in elementary school, and not only do I work in elementary school, but I work in gen ed.
Yeah.
So a lot of the activities that I do are for individuals who are in that setting, and I do often get messages like, do you ever feel like a glorified English teacher? And it annoys me because I'm like, okay, well, that's how that individual is responsible for utilizing their speech and language skills at this period of time in their life.
Right.
So I don't see the hang up on having to write a correct sentence. We also have to speak in a correct sentence. So.
Well, and I think a lot of times people, and that's where the difficulty telling the story lies, is that there's not much drama in the day-to-day business of what we do. You don't have a client typically that walks in one day and then 2 hours later they're normal. Like, they've gotten to that point in a 2 hour period. And so it's not really a glamorous story to tell of, somebody going to therapy for 6 months or a year. But in reality, that's what people need a lot of the time to lay the foundation to be effective communicators. And, what more important thing to have in your life than either to be able to communicate well, to hear well, or to be able to swallow?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. We are very good people.
We are.
And very busy people.
We are very busy, busy, good people.
So I know Deborah had some listener questions, right?
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to get to. Okay.
Yes,
so,
I gotcha.
First, I was going to do my questions and then listener questions. Okay.
All right.
So for me, I said my number 2 was awareness, but my number 1 is just like, so I love the field of speech language pathology, and I do feel like it's where I do belong professionally. However, I did not come from a background where I had a family that saved for my college.
Right.
So every cent of what I have done has been through a student loan, down to like student housing.
Right.
For when I did that first year. So I'm not saying that I regret it, but I am saying that it, it's very difficult to just have this debt hanging over your head. And in conjunction to that, I feel like I've advanced pretty far in my 6-year career, and now I'm more interested in becoming specialized. Right. And if I want to do that, then it's just more money for more continuing education. And I'm just like, put it on my tab, I guess. What am I supposed to do? Should I have never done this?
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
A lot of what you speak to, I think, is a problem, we have as a profession in general, and not just our profession. A lot of professions have them. I mean, so many people now, and I see this as a college professor, I mean, so many young people are coming out of school with such crippling debt that, they can't do anything else. I mean, we wonder why there is a shortage of PhDs in our field. And there's largely a shortage because people do not want to delay making some money after they got $50,000 of debt.
Right, 50. That'd be nice.
Well, yeah. I mean, and then you just, you keep adding on to that, like you said, with the specialties and things like that. I mean, I went through it to get the board certification in stuttering, and you do have to make difficult choices that as a professional you shouldn't have to make. And then you're talking about, like, in many circumstances, people having to buy their own therapy materials, and that's just something else you add on to the debt. and the bills. And I think we need to do a much better job of really working with other professional organizations to be able to come up with reasonable solutions for solving that problem. Because I mean, this is a more global problem than just speech pathology. I mean, it's a national problem, and it drains the economy. I mean, you have people who are coming out of school who should be the ones spending money on houses, cars, furniture, and instead they can't buy anything because they have a full-time job, but all their money's going to their student loan payment.
Right. Yeah. That's just like a global issue, I think. Well, America issue.
What I really feel like, though, is that although it's a global issue, I agree with that. I just wish, so I'm happy to have, put the money out there to go get my degree so that I can pursue this career. I just wish that there were more solid, loan forgiveness programs if you were to be working in the field for a certain amount of time. I couldn't imagine everyone paying for or getting forgiveness for degrees that aren't being utilized within the field of the demands. I'm just saying that what I think would be more reassuring was if there were more concrete programs to get some sort of reimbursement, since there is such a high demand for speech pathologists.
I think there are reimbursement programs. I mean, I don't know if you've looked into
it. I have. They're just not concrete. It's if you do this, then maybe.
Yeah, you have to work for a nonprofit for 10 years to get loan forgiveness. So that could be a public school, it could be a hospital, but it has to be a nonprofit organization. Universities count as nonprofits in most cases. But you still have to pay for 10 years, and then you would get the rest of your loan forgiven after 10 years.
And then it's 120 qualifying payments, and I'm like, okay, is this one a qualifying payment? So it's just
they make you jump through so many hoops that most people just say it's not even worth it to do it.
Right. Yeah. So that's all. I don't think that it should be free. I just think it would be nice if there was some sort of program in which there was a more guaranteed means of getting some forgiveness for.
I think some of that ties back to reimbursement issues as well, that I feel like there could be more programs established to do that if we were getting paid what we deserve to be paid for our services most of the time.
Exactly.
Right.
And so much of that, again, just goes back to advocacy and, really trying to have a specific plan to work with insurance companies to talk about why there is a need for our services and the importance of them.
Right.
Yep.
So then I said loans awareness, and then my third is streamlining a little bit more. So I'm an adjunct professor this year.
Okay.
And I'm teaching undergraduate clinical and research writing and graduate speech and educational setting. So for both classes, we had to discuss documentation, the writing class and the educational class. And I did a lot of research being how should a speech pathology SOAP note look? I know what mine looks like. I know what, SOAP, but I couldn't find any document that was this is how. I just wish it was just more uniform so that you knew that what you were teaching was what is expected across the board.
So I'm probably going to go off the reservation a little bit here and say that, that again, I think is something that we need to examine, because a lot of times we are told, and I think it depends on what setting you work in, certainly, but a lot of times we're told that the better your documentation, the better you'll be reimbursed.
Right.
That's not always true. Because typically in most outpatient settings, a client comes to you with a number of approved visits of speech therapy per year. And you could have the best documentation since Van Riper, and you're not going to get more than 20 visits a year if that's what it says in their plan.
Right.
Exactly.
And so, I think we need to come up with more, kind of maybe align our ways of doing things with a little bit better. But I also think that we also need to be okay with streamlining some of the things that we do. And, if you look at, doctors and the way they write a daily note for a typical visit, a lot of it is not as detailed as what we do in a SOAP note for a therapy session. And we're seeing a kid, 8 times a month.
Right.
And I'm not really sure that I see in a lot of the clients that I've worked with over the years enough of a change from like Tuesday to Thursday to justify writing a page
No.
for each day.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. I
And
agree.
I think we've gotten sucked into that by the insurance industry of saying, well, that's the way it has to be done to get coverage. But I don't think they read it most of the time anyway.
No, not unless they want to look back.
Right.
And I have so many people come to me, they're like, aren't you taking data to what percent accuracy? I'm like, it's been 70 for 3 weeks. It's going to be 70 for a little bit longer. Like, it's not going to. So it's just, the percentages don't even change that drastically from week to week, maybe 5%, and they can waver back and forth. That doesn't mean there's no progress. It could be you expose them to a different sheet of antonyms. You expose them to a different type of texture consistency. So it's just, that's an issue for me that I guess I can't really articulate right now. But
well, the way I always try to approach that when I have these discussions with insurance companies is you have to look at what that data is going to do to change the plan of therapy for the patient. And so if I do a fluency count, for example, on somebody, on Tuesday and they're 15% disfluent, and I do it again on Thursday and they're 13% disfluent, what does that tell me about the patient? Nothing.
no, Thursday might have been a better day.
For no reason at all.
No, like that's
And they might spike up to 20% next week for no reason at all. And, so I'm not really documenting progress. I'm documenting an arbitrary number in a given moment.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel.
And that really doesn't do anything to change what you're going to be doing in therapy. So I would much rather see fewer notes. If I were an insurance company, and I try to explain this to them when I talk to them, I would much rather see fewer notes with more concrete examples of how what I'm doing in therapy translates into real life.
Mm-hmm.
That's much more meaningful for me to look at than, can you give me data on how many times this person stuttered during this half-hour session, which tells me nothing.
Right. Yes.
It also depended on what they were talking about and like other variables too. So I mean, I don't know if you can capture all that in a session note.
Well, yeah, you can't. And the thing is, you can capture all of that stuff in like a 2 to 3 month period. And that's why, progress reports are really good and important. I guess personally, I haven't always seen the value of a daily note for most of the clients we see in an outpatient setting. I know we have to do them. We do them. We teach our students to do them. But, again, I think we've gotten sucked into that trap a little bit too. And just to appease people when it really doesn't make total sense to do that all the time.
I do like to write down all the activities that we did. This way, if anyone were to question me about that day, I'd be like, oh, I remember the dragonfly day.
Well, see, yeah, here's the thing. Like, okay, let's say I'm working with a client who stutters, right? And let's say today I take them to Starbucks so that they can order food and stutter on purpose or use some strategy that I'm working on or just work on communicating with people. If my daily note just said that, somebody would read it and say, well, you didn't do anything today. Well, because you don't have data. Well, yes, I actually did something that's making a much bigger difference in that person's life than me sitting down charting how fluent they were during a 20-minute session.
Exactly. Yeah. I would love to see that change.
Yeah.
So I said my top 3. Maria, do you have any ASHA issues that you wanted to bring up before I got to listeners?
I had a thought, but I don't know how much time we have, and it's a controversial thought. So
I like controversy.
Oh, okay. What are your thoughts then on, I'll just keep it to one. I'll pick one controversial thought instead of
okay. One is good.
What your take is on rapid prompting method, RPM, because I know ASHA let out that statement, and I'll leave my opinion out of it for now and just like hear if you have a side about it, if you have any thoughts about it.
So this isn't the population I work with. So, something like that would be a good example of how I would see my role as convening a committee of people who are experts in that area to help make the best decision on that. And, our scope of practice is so big that we can't possibly know about everything.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I've done a lot of good work in stuttering. When you start talking about things like that, when you start talking about swallowing, I'm out of my wheelhouse. And so, you have to be able to rely on, people who specialize in those areas to help you make informed decisions. And I think a lot of times that's where some of the public relations problems come from, that we have at ASHA sometimes, where they put out statements where they haven't really consulted people who are specialists in that area.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that's what leads to having statements having to be pulled back. And, so, I know a little bit about the issue you're talking about because it created such controversy. And, I think it was a really good example of how I'm not sure that they consulted enough people who knew the issue to be able to say, was this a good idea to do or input out, or do we need to get more evidence before we do that?
I know. And it is difficult to collect the evidence. I mean, I think I did see both sides, but I have seen it done before, and I didn't believe it in the beginning either, and I have seen it though with my own eyes, and I didn't think that it was possible. But I mean, we need more data. That's all I'll say too.
I read a really good book about 10 years ago. The book was called What?
The Reason I Jump.
No, the book was called The Puzzle People, and it was by Thomas Starzl, who was the guy who invented transplant surgery.
Oh,
and he was a physician at the University of Pittsburgh, where I was at, and he back in the 50s, 60s, he really started transplants by doing kidney transplants first, and then he moved to liver transplants. And it's a really fascinating book because he talks about how he doesn't think that in today's society he would be able to get his program off the ground because people are so into doing only things that have existing evidence.
Right.
That the first patient that he had who died, they would have pulled the plug and said, no, we can't do this anymore.
Right. That's interesting.
And he talked about how, he had to have those patients who weren't successful because they taught him about rejection, and you had to use anti-rejection drugs, and what you had to do successful transplants. And eventually he perfected it and did it on a bunch of different things. But I think it really is a good point that you can't say that you can't do something just because there isn't any evidence. There has to be bad evidence for you to say you can't do something.
That's a good point. Yeah, exactly. Right. I know. Well, we'll see what happens, right? We'll see what the future holds for ASHA and their take on it. But, I did want to write an email to them and everything. I haven't got a chance to, but now you're inspiring me to do that. I have worked with a young boy who has used it, and his mother is such a big advocate for it. So.
Well, to me, that's the best evidence is if you have anything, and I'm not just talking about this issue, but if you have anything that you have that's working for an individual person, that's what it's about. I mean, it's not about group data. It's about whether the individual in front of you is getting better.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's changed his life. So, but we'll see, right? Us see. I don't want to get too much caught up into this. We have to come to an end. So Craig, if you wanted to leave us off with any last words, anything you didn't get to talk about.
Wait, before we close off, let me just bring up one last thing because we didn't do listeners.
Yeah, I know. If you have a few listener questions you want to do, that's fine.
It says 6 minutes and 55 seconds. We can do. Okay. I'll just edit this part out. Okay. So a listener concern was, you mentioned this earlier, but actually more specifically, caseload caps. So the caseload workload for individuals in all settings, it seems, is too high to be productive. So is there anything that ASHA can do in order to really enforce stricter guidelines in terms of that?
Well, I think the answer to that is yes. I think that the mistake that people make is they think that ASHA can come in and say, this is the number. And that's not what ASHA can do because, I learned that in my licensure battles in Pennsylvania when we were going through that. Departments of education don't really care what ASHA says or thinks about things.
Right.
So, here's what you have to do if you're the national organization. You have to come up with a specific workload formula that is agreed upon, that makes sense for people, and that's adaptable to multiple settings, meaning that there probably has to be a different workload formula for schools versus medical settings versus outpatient because people do different things in those settings and have different responsibilities. Then what you need to do is you need to form alliances with the state associations and work with them to get that workload formula put into the licensure law so that places cannot violate it. Otherwise, having a document or a handout that says, hey, our caseload is 65, but it's just a handout,
Right.
that doesn't matter. And it's never going to be enforced. So you can come up with stuff like that all day, and it's not going to really mean anything at the end of the day unless you can get it into a law.
Right. But if ASHA starts off with like, this is what we have found, then SLPs within their own state can utilize that information to make it happen within their state.
Yeah, and I think that ASHA, I mean, can work also with the states closely to help that legislation get passed. I mean, because, it is still a national organization with 200,000 people and, carries some significance because of that. So I do think there is a strong role for ASHA in that. I think the role is, though, helping to develop the document and then also helping to work with the state associations to get it passed into a law.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as simple as saying let's put a caseload number out there and then expect everybody to adopt it. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. So it's like there has to be initiatives at the state level, but then also at the individual level too. Like, do you want to do something? So gather some paperwork and go to your
Yes,
state.
absolutely.
And then the final issue that I saw brought up most frequently was that accessing research is time consuming and not very easy. And is there any way to make that more accessible to professionals?
That's a tough thing because I'm not sure that there's anything that ASHA can do about that because that's beyond, an ASHA issue. I mean, ASHA has control over their journals, which you get access to as a member. But if you're talking about other journals outside of ASHA, that's all comes back to the publisher and how they, view access. One strategy I would say for people is, this is a good reason why you should supervise grad students. Because if you supervise grad students, you should be able to talk to the college that you supervise the grad students with to see if they can get you access to journals that the university has access to as a part-time university employee.
Right.
That's a good idea.
Because I work for a school, so I just still log on to the same email and just look through there.
Right.
Yeah. So okay. Makes sense.
That's a good idea, though. I didn't even think of that. So thank you, Craig, for that idea.
Sure.
Another reason to mentor, right, or supervise.
Right, exactly.
So everyone's got to go out and vote. When is that?
Okay, so voting started on April 16th, and voting goes until May 29th.
Okay.
So you should be getting emails or have already gotten an email from ASHA that kind of sends you a direct link to vote. If you just Google ASHA elections, though, that will also take you to the place you can go to vote.
Okay.
And if our listeners wanted to know more about you, where can they find you?
So good question. I can give you my email address directly. It's craig.coleman@marshall.edu. So if people have specific questions, they can send them there. I also have a Facebook group that's about my candidacy, and that is if you search Connecting Our Pathways on Facebook, that's the name of the group. And so I post some videos there about my positions on things, and we'll post some different things on there as well.
Great. Okay. Connecting Our Pathways.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us, Craig.
No problem, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Good luck.
That was a very refreshing and informative interview that we had with Craig.
Absolutely. It was such a pleasure to listen to him, and I'm going to vote for him. I decided.
Yeah, me too.
Put it out there.
I also just listened to a bunch of his lectures that are available online, and he's got other research articles that talk about having a parent's program for treating individuals with stutters and disfluencies. And one thing that I took away from it was a lot of times clinicians, they make the mistake of being like, oh, I stutter sometimes too. But that's like right there, you're kind of like
diminishing
what they go through, but then also like losing credit on your behalf, because then that person's going to be like, okay, well, I see other people all the time and there's nobody who's like stopping or blocking for 5 seconds straight. It's not the same.
Right.
So that was a
Yes.
good takeaway.
I like to, when I have kids with stuttering, I could say, like, you know, we're practicing our speech. There's a lot of things Miss Maria has to practice too. You know, so like I have to practice going to bed earlier or something. I don't know, I just make something up. Like
Right.
drinking more water.
Yeah.
I don't know. So just kind of related. Like we're all working on something.
Right.
Yes.
We should be.
We should be, yes.
Yeah.
You know, we're all in this together here.
Are we doing tips and tricks?
Okay, well, was that my tip or trick? Well, no. I'm going to give some more tips or tricks because I
Okay,
got
let's
some
hear
good
it.
tips or tricks.
Yeah.
My tip or trick, I guess I'll keep it with the stuttering S topic because Craig does specialize in that. I do like to start with drawing pictures, and then I do like to draw roads that are bumpy and smooth just to teach that vocabulary. And that, because roads are bumpy, and kids can experience that when they're in a car or bus or just walking, and then smooth, and then just drawing that. And that's our first like intro lesson or first 2 or 3 lessons of speech.
Oh, and then so I also started with a young fluency client, and we today did the Lego car game, and sometimes the road is bumpy and sometimes the road is smooth. So that's how I chose to introduce it. And then we like
Nice.
made bumps with our arms, and then we made smoothness with our arms, and then we made our speech bumpy on purpose, and then we made our speech smooth on purpose.
Cool.
And that's how we
yeah.
introduced it, and it was all. I talked to Craig a little bit after this interview, and he gave me those pointers, so I just did what he told me to.
Nice. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
So we're going to end with a quote, and I like this quote. I feel like I really do this, and it's speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves.
That's lovely, Maria.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. On that note, this has been another episode of SLP's Wine and Cheese. I'm Maria,
I'm Deb.
and have a good night.
See you May 31st at the Creek in the Cave.
That's right. We'll be there.
Buy your tickets.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hey ladies, I'm kind of sort of loving and openly admittingly fangirling y'all lovely duo of SLP's Wine and Cheese.
Yes, and we love listening to your podcast, First Bite.
Well, thank you. I'm Michelle Dawson, and I specialize in functional but fun treatment for medically fragile kiddos, especially for those that have feeding and swallowing impairments and who use AAC devices as part of their total communication plan. On my podcast, First Bite, we discuss all topics related to early intervention and pediatric speech therapy. We address those worrisome ethics and clinical supervision concerns, as well as jump into private practice ownership and really get into the nooks and crannies of all the things in between by interviewing guest experts in the field. Then, every 4th episode, we bring it back home to my Palmetto State by having evidence-based reviews of case studies or resources with my dear friend and colleague, Aaron Forward, who kind of sort of came up with this whole idea.
First Bite is partnered with Speech Therapy PD, offering evidence-based content in a podcast. Each episode can count as 1 hour ASHA CEU. Find them on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts.
Absolutely. And thanks for all you do and for spreading joy into the world.
Cheers.